art doesn't need to be serious. Oh, it can be for sure. We all know situations where it is serious, where everyone has strong opinions about it, and you wouldn't dare make a joke. But it doesn't need to be serious. Think back to when you first started making things, before expectations and other infections came into your mind. When you made things for fun. When you made things just to make them. It's an interesting notion, isn't it? Looking back from our jaded perspectives in our teens, 20s, 30s, like myself, the ability to sit down and just make something because you want to? Well, honestly, as we get older, we afford ourselves fewer things that are like this, fewer opportunities to do a thing that we simply enjoy and that society doesn't really care for. Oh sure, society is fine with you sitting down and watching football or watching your Netflix shows, but if you're gonna sit down and waste time drawing, well, that's just juvenile. But it's fun. And it's important to do things that are fun. And it's important to realize that your art doesn't have to be serious. Welcome to the session. My name is Zach, and today we are dealing with spicy. This is an earlier piece from last year's Inktober. Andora and her little celestial kraken are exploring a pot that looks like it might destroy them, as the peppers are floating around and lovely chunks of sausage and skulls and death and flames are floating up above. This is one of my favorite media to work with, ink, pen and ink. I love it. I fell in love with it in high school, and I probably would have fallen in love with it earlier if I'd had the opportunity. What was the first medium that you fell in love with when you were young, when you first started to make things? Was it crayons, Play-Doh, mud? Let me know in the comments down below. I've talked before about making sure that art is fun, but the other side of it, what I mentioned at the beginning of this session, is that it doesn't have to be serious. Like, you can just make things for the sake of making. You can put marks down because it checks notes, makes you happy, feels good. I don't know, I'll need some more research on this because doing something that seems totally inefficient and that is not productive seems like, I don't know, a hobby? Something that you could do to seek joy? What a farce. But if it doesn't have to be serious, then what do we do with all of the educational professionals, the people at college campuses who will spend tremendous quantities of time talking about Greco-Roman art, Baroque art, rococo art, neoclassical, classical, Renaissance, high Renaissance, and 30 or 40 other artistic movements that mean almost nothing to those who are not in that world themselves? Now, this is not a hate on Art History Day. Art history has its place, and it's wonderful, and people pull joy from it. But there is a shadow that it casts upon the rest of the art world, a need to be more like those who came before, to be serious, to be academic. And art doesn't need to be. Art can just be this weird, amorphous, ethereal thing that floats around in our brains and never actually makes any sense. Now, I am a quite logical and legalistic person, both to my own benefit and the detriment of many people who spend time with me. I am quite literal. I like things black and white. The problem is that the world is in color, and this creates issues. I see things far more seriously than I probably should. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I've been able to understand and realize that I can work on my art for no other reason than the fact that it brings me joy. Now, this also coalesces into the fact that I worked as a teacher for 11 years with middle school and high school students, which means that I had the opportunity to help them learn to cultivate joy. And that was probably the biggest privilege of being in the school system, of being a teacher. I got to help other people work through things that will be lifetime, hopefully, lifetime enjoyment factors for them. Many of the students that I stay in touch with, that I meet with, that I talk to, continue to work on their artistic pursuits. And it's a lovely thing. Because art is beautiful and it's wonderful. And though it can be oh so serious, it can also just be fun and joyful. And that, I think, is what I'm focusing on this session, because most of the time I just start rambling and we see where I go. I do have some random bullet points usually, and I stick to them probably 35% of the time. I have been better recently, but I've had to make up after the Christmas season and making lots of videos and trying to get everything out so that I don't get behind. Because, again, literal, legalistic, I do not like following, or no, I love following the rules. What am I saying? Oh my goodness! I love following the rules, and I hate going against them. And so even though these rules are rules that I have built for myself, my release schedule, when I do videos and how I do videos, they're still rules, and I still try to follow them to the best of my ability. This does mean that I have a tendency to be quite consistent. It means that I expect everyone else to be, which is not how reality works. But in my artwork, it doesn't have to be that consistent. As long as I am consistent with it, I continue to dive in, I continue to work on things, and I work. And I have fun. And I play. But art, it is not serious. It is just art. And at this point, I've reached a place where I am taking it a little bit more seriously, which is kind of funny, because as I have detached myself and realized that it doesn't need to be highly academic, it can be the pursuit of a particular thing that just brings me happiness, that I can draw dragons and dinosaurs and robots and all these things that I enjoy that are not educational or high academia in any sense. My skills have grown. My joy has grown. I've been more consistent. I've stuck to the things that I enjoy. And now I actually have the bandwidth to start learning all of the things that are more difficult, that are more serious, that are more academic. Only now, with the structure that I have by delving into art constantly, by doing things that are not serious, do I have the time and ability to do the serious things. One could argue that the making of videos, that the producing of educational content, of making classes and other educational material like that is quite serious. But in my life, it's built on the foundation of fun. It was built on the back of doing things that I wanted to do. And now, of course, I've harnessed that and I'm moving forward with that into new territory. But it's odd. It seems odd to me, at least, that investing time into something not serious has led to the ability to focus on the serious things that are a little bit more difficult to focus on. They are harder. It is, I think, not debatable that it is harder to study a thing than to just play around with some of the pieces. I think perhaps all of this is to say that art is complicated and that it takes a personal structure for each human being that approaches it. It is not a monolith. It is not something that is always the same for every single human who interacts with it. And so the point of this sketchbook session, I suppose, is just that we need to be aware of what our preconceived notions are when it comes to art and understand that that's what they are. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean that we need to get rid of them, but I think that we benefit from understanding them. We benefit from knowing what opinions we hold, and then probably benefit more from understanding why we hold them. So much of who we are is dictated by these things that we think and the values that we hold. And if we don't understand them, if we don't know where they came from, we can kind of be pulled around by our own whimsical concepts of reality. And for some, maybe that's tolerable and that's an okay way to live. For me, that seems terrible. I want to be responsible for the decisions that I make. I want to be responsible for the things that I say, whether they are good or bad, because in that, I have the ability and the power to change things, to make them better, and to work moving forward. So it benefits us to understand how we view art, what art is to us. And it is this complicated thing. I once, in my early teaching days, perhaps the second or third year that I was teaching, sat down with this glorious, noble goal of devising a definition for art. If you're laughing right now, it is understandable, but it was a fun pursuit for me, one that was futile once I put enough time into it, but I still think it would be something I would enjoy delving back into at some point. I started by going way too specific, by saying these things are art and these things aren't art. And as I started to pull that apart, I realized that there is a tremendous level of arrogance in those kind of assertions, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And I started moving backward. Then I started looking at the root of the word. Where does the word art come from? In the Latin, in the Greek, in the Hebrew, going back as far as I could. I found quotes and I found writings by authors and philosophers as far back as I could. What did Plato have to say about art? What did Aristotle have to say about art? What did Tolstoy have to say about art? And I started to uncover a lot of things, and it became immediately much more difficult to definitively say that something was or was not art. And so the second rendition of that definition came to a list of, I think, 24 different specifications of art. I came to the conclusion that it was much more difficult to say this isn't art, so I just decided that I would take all of the art forms and classify them. Now, this wasn't like painting, drawing, sculpture, ceramics. It was more like commercial art, art that is craft-based, high art, low art, comic art, all these different things. And again, I was trying not to assume that I had the definitions. I was trying to go off of what much wiser people than me had said in the past. And I got somewhere with it, but it was kind of taking a non-serious thing really, really seriously. And it was probably not it was not pointless. It was not pointful. It didn't really have a huge point to it. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed going through, and I think I benefited from understanding a little bit more thoroughly how other people approach art. And it's such a strange thing because most of us can either, we either come from two camps, right? We can look at things and say, that's not art, or we are the kind of person who says, I don't have the ability to decide that. Now, it's obviously more nuanced than that because humans are so complicated, but most people seem to sit in one of those two areas. I'm an INTJ on the Myers-Briggs. The judging is the last letter there, the J, and that is really putting things into boxes, categorizing things. It's what I want to do with existence, with life. And so for me, it's not that hard to just off the cuff say, well, this is art and this isn't art. When I delve into those things, it becomes difficult to defend my positions, and it's really just a psychological habit. It's something that I want to do because it means that the world is understandable and that it's black and white. But that is not how everyone functions. We all approach this weird, ethereal thing so differently. And again, I think the benefit here and the point of this whole thing is understand how you approach it. Understand what it means to you. Not to be all fluffy about it. Just understand your perspective because you understand more about yourself, and it will help you work through your own creative struggles. It will help you answer questions that nobody else can answer for you. Because art is such a strange and often quite personal thing. So, just remember, you don't have to take it all that seriously. But I guess you could if you want to. As always, thanks for being a part of this with me. This was a strange one, lots of rambles, and I went in a couple really weird directions. So if you enjoyed that, let me know, and if you didn't, that'd be fine too. You can let me know that below, but just if that's the case, let me know what your favorite part of the rambles were. If you're still here, I assume you enjoyed something. If not, maybe you're just being a really lovely, loyal listener and subscriber, which if that's the case, thank you very much. These are kind of rambly because I just never know what random train of thought is going to be the thing that a person needs to hear today. And if that's you, thanks for being here. And if it's not, I still appreciate you. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.